If you told me that this ink combination was going to be a meta contender with the release of set 1, I wouldn't have believed you. This is Sapphire aggro and welcome to my deck guide. So why does this deck work? Basically, we all know that Cusco is a really strong card, right? A 5 cost uninkable, quest for free, and it has ward. It's a really strong tempo tool, and it's one of the main reasons that Emerald is so aggressive. So we've been sleeping on this Maleficent card, right? It has way better stats than the Cusco, with 6 health, surviving basically anything you throw at it, other than obviously a Dragonfire, quests for the same amount, and is inkable, which covers up the main problem of Cusco, which is its consistency, and we have a really powerful card. Of course we don't have ward, and we don't have the no touchy ability, but there are ways around that in this deck, and just the stats alone make the card really, really strong. Other key cards in this deck are Felicities, which just gives you the tempo from turn 2 onwards. It can get around cards like Simba, which are like key anti-aggro tools, and Simba is a key tool as well with Lilo to just outrace you in those matchups. So really strong in those matchups. We do only run 2 of them, but it's just really strong for building and establishing a really strong board as soon as turn 2. We also have Eye of the Fates, which is a really strong item card, which can just guarantee you an extra lore every turn. It is 4 cost, so it's a little bit expensive, but in the turns where you can just kind of weave it in, suddenly you have Maleficents that are questing for 4, Cuscos that are questing for 4, and if you can do that turn after turn, the card gets a lot of value really, really quickly. This is a deck list we've got. This is one of the top 8 deck lists from Miami, the 1K a while ago, but you know, we see a lot of 1-drops, we see 4 1-drops for the aggro, we see all the Emerald aggro tools that we normally want to see, such as like Flynn, Cheshire Cat, Hans, which can quest for free. You know, just the basics that we've already seen throughout the whole set so far. Jasper just stops your opponents from questing for their turn, so they're forced to trade, which buys you a lot of time and gives you the advantage in the race in a lot of the aggro matchups. We see Let It Go, which is essentially an inkable Dragonfire in many ways, especially in aggro games where you don't really care how much ink they have. Obviously you want to play around the 7 costs, such as Be Prepared and stuff like that, but inkable Dragonfire is always good. And yeah, you know, there's not much card draw. We do have to develop your brains, but other than that, we have the Auroras, which gives all your cards wards, so that kind of fixes the problem of Maleficent, so it can survive those Dragonfires that we just spoke about, and just stuff like that really. So overall, really, really solid list, and just an unexpected ink combination. So the main combo, which I just spoke about, is basically just your Aurora plus any card that quests for free. When you play a card, it's very hard at the moment to remove. The main answers are normally like Dragonfire or Be Prepared, but those cards are very expensive and inconsistent, just mainly because they're uninkable. So when you play your Aurora on turn 5 and give all your cards ward, suddenly your cards are guaranteed to quest for free. And in a game where you only need to quest for 20, it's a big number. 3 is a big number, and you run so many of them in this deck that you're guaranteed to just turn your card sideways and you will eventually hit the 20 that we're trying to hit. So for the Mulligan, you want to look for a solid turn 1 play, a solid turn 2 play, and a solid turn 3 play basically. So this can be any 1-drop, 2-drop, 3-drop, or you can always mix it up and go for like a 1-drop and a 2-drop on turn 3 just to go wide. It really comes down to like your skill as a player to decide when you want to go wide and when you just want to play bigger units. But you need to have a strong start basically. You just want to be very explosive on the board, and just go turn 1, turn 2, turn 3, and just establish dominance very quickly. So we have cards like Flynn Rider to do that we haven't spoke about yet, but he discards a card when anyone attacks it. So it's good to just keep your opponent at bay and just slow them down where you can just accelerate your own game plan. So for the matchups, we have quite a decent matchup spread to be honest. We have Sapphire and Favourable. This is because Sapphire typically wants to ramp. Obviously this deck is quite unconventional, that it's an aggro Sapphire deck, but Sapphire typically wants to ramp, so by the time they've ramped up to their big cards, you're kind of already just way ahead of them, and you're just kind of waiting for your free questers to just stick and just turn them sideways to end the game. So you shouldn't really have an issue against other Sapphire decks, but yeah. So for the even, we have Ruby. This is because Ruby only really stops aggro from turn 7 onwards, and by that point in the game, you've already kind of quested for so much that you're nearing the end of the game basically. So you can give all your cards ward as well, so when they go for the Dragonfires and stuff like that, it doesn't really matter what they Dragonfire because you just have so many units ready to go that are also going to quest for free. So once they spend a Dragonfire, they've essentially wasted a turn to remove something that's not really that big of a deal for you, which is clearly a bigger deal for them. We have Emerald and Green as well. This is just because it's most likely going to be like a mirror match race. just who can play cards that quest for a lot and who can reach 20 quicker. So it just kind of comes down to who can draw better and who can play the mulligan better. So it's important to kind of make sure that you're well prepared in your mulligans and making sure that you're making the right choices and what to put back, and also making sure you're keeping cards that you can ink. So you can always keep expensive cards just for the ink, just to guarantee that you can have those smooth couple of first 3 turns that we spoke about. Amethyst is a tricky one to put anywhere, but I've put it in even because Amethyst mainly wants to be either aggro a lot of the time, with the like cheaper Maleficent cards that questing for 2. So again, you're just trying to race, but I feel like you should have a really good race against it, or they're going for more of the control game plan with the Ruby, which in that case, you know, like I've said, they're trying to get to turn 7 anyway, so you're just on the turn 7 clock basically. Then in unfavorable, we've got Steel. We all know what Steel wants to do. It wants to spread damage across the board and kind of wipe out your whole board. Thankfully, the Maleficent does have a lot of health, so we can survive a lot of the burst damage that Steel has. But if they can establish an early Tinkerbell on turn 4, then we're going to have some issues. But other than that, it's just a quite difficult matchup. So, you know, making sure that you're mulliganing correctly and making a lot of right decisions and not letting them trade into you, like positively for them is really important in this matchup. But it is definitely winnable when you're playing the Sapphire cards, just because they do have the higher health stats. And for our last unfavorable, we have Amber. This is because they thrive off of having damage characters that they can heal, which then allows them to draw cards, and they're playing a lot of beefy units, and most of the time they're paired with Steel, so they can, you know, have that spread damage, which you're already quite weak against, but then also healing their cards to draw more cards, get that card advantage, and eventually just winning the game out through mid-range game plans like that isn't really good for you in this style of deck. So there's some matchup spread. I'm going to hop into some games now, see if I can show a deck in action. If you want to see any other decks, leave them in the comment section below and I'll get around to them. Other than that, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the games. Okay, so going into game 1, we have quite a weak hand here, so we're going to mulligan for basically a 1-drop. I'm going to keep the Flynn because it guarantees us a solid 2-drop, and you can keep Jasper, although I'm going to get rid of it for this just because I don't know what we're playing against, whereas you typically want Jasper in the aggro mirror matches. Okay, cool, so we have a 1-drop in Duke of Wesselton, so I'm going to plan out my first couple of turns here just to make sure that we're optimizing how many points we're questing for essentially. So turn 1 I can go Duke, turn 2 I can go Flynn, turn 3 I can go Cat, and then turn 4 I can go double Aurora. Saying that, I can go turn 3 shift Aurora, but I think it's better just to go wider just because it quests for more. So we don't need the develop your brain for this strategy, so we're going to go ahead and ink that, even though it's a 1-cost card and we could have played it this turn. We've already established that this hand kind of has our first 5 turns in it basically, as long as we draw inkable cards. This game plan can change based on what we top deck, but it's a solid strategy. And it's consistent. We know that's what we want to do. So they are going to bounce our Duke, so we can just ink it now. Mainly because we don't have another 1-drop. If we had 2 1-drops in hand, we could ink something else and then play 2 1-drops because it's a lot more difficult to get rid of for the opponent. But we'll just go ahead and ink that, and then we can play our Flynn, and we can stick to our 5 turns that we went over at the start. I think we have this Maleficent, which is a bit better than the Aurora, so maybe I want to go maybe like a turn 4 shift Aurora and then turn 5 Maleficent. It's quite explosive. And now we've got this 1-drop Duke to kind of fill out our curve. It's quite nice as well. So we can go turn 3 Aurora and Duke. So if we go turn 3 Aurora and Duke, then we can do turn 4 shift and then turn 5 Maleficent. So we can get rid of one of these Auroras, which is fine. And then go Aurora and Duke. And then we can go ahead and quest with this Flynn. It's good to quest with this Flynn here. We're going to quest anyway regardless of what they play, but if they want to get rid of this Flynn, they have to discard 2 cards and get rid of their whole board, so that's quite solid for us to do. Hands are running a little dry, but I'm quite happy with our board state. It looks like the opponent's playing some evasives, so it should be a race, and I think with our hand and just the amount of points that we're questing for, we should be quite good. Thankfully we top decked a 1-drop, so we can go ahead and ink this Cheshire Cat. And then we can go ahead and shift into this Aurora, and then we can play this 1-drop as well, and then we can just quest for a lot. All our characters now have ward, and we've set up nicely to go into a turn 5 Maleficent. If we top deck something that's uninkable, it should only be Cusco, so we can just ink this Maleficent and then play the Cusco anyway. So the game plan does change a little bit, but it's adaptable. The strategy is adaptable. We're requesting for a lot, and the game's almost over, and it's only turn 4. The opponent's not really done much to catch up. They have played this Zeus, and they are going to trade into the Dukes rather than the Auroras. But you can just see like the amount of power this deck has. It's very explosive, and it just starts straight away and doesn't stop until you kind of close out. Opponent's got 1 card left in hand, and they're not really doing anything too threatening. So we can go ahead and ink this Aurora now. The 2-cost Aurora, sorry. And then we can just go straight for this Maleficent, and then you're gonna see how impactful this Maleficent is. It's so difficult to get rid of, just because it has 6 health, which is insane. And I am gonna trade this Duke into the Zeus. It's just a free kill, and then we can quest with Flynn. If they want to attack into Flynn, they're gonna have to discard their only card. So yeah, I'm very happy with our position. It's always important to kind of take note as well of when you can make very positive trades. So right there, you'll see like the Duke into the Zeus is just a free trade, slows them down, kind of speeds us up. So a massive fan of that. They are going to play their Cusco, but they have no cards in hand, so we can kind of do what we want from here. It might be better to go for the Cat and the Felicities rather than just the Aurora, but because this quests for free, whereas the Aurora only quests for 2. It's a tricky one for sure. I think if we quest for 4, we go to 13 here, and then we'll go to 17, 18. So it's better to go for the Cat and Felicities here because it sets up lethal 1 turn earlier, whereas if we played just the Aurora here, the next turn would go to 19 rather than 20. So it's just those little things you have to keep in mind. How can I maximize the amount of lore that I'm gaining, rather than just playing the bigger units? The only way the opponent can really win here is if they attack into this Duke, and even then we're at 19, and the game's basically done from there. So they're just going to fully quest, and I guess they are going to bounce back the Duke, which is fine. But again, I can just ink this Jasmine. Opponent's questing for 6, and they have no threats to shift, so we can just go Aurora here, get everything ward, make it really difficult for the opponent, and then just quest all the way up to 19. And then the support's useless here, so I don't think there's anything the opponent can do. They're going to go to 18 here, and then yeah, there's nothing that either of their inks can do to clear this whole board. So that's going to be a win for game 1, and let's go for game 2. Okay, so going second here in game 2, again we're not seeing, we are seeing a 1-drop here, so our Mulligan does look quite good actually. I'm kind of happy to keep everything, to be honest. So I think I am just going to keep everything. There's an argument to kind of get rid of this Mad Hatter, just because it's another 5 cost and we already see 2 of them, but you can just look at it as just free ink basically, so I'm just going to keep everything. We have a solid just turn 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 curve, and then we can just go out with more 5 drops. So the opponent's going to play a Captain Hook here. Again, we have the Develop Your Brain, just going to ink that, not really needing it. I feel like you don't really need it too much when you play 8 1-drops, just because you're statistically very likely to see one if you are to mulligan like any amount of cards really. So you should always be safe on the 1-drop. 1-drop is always important in aggro as well. Obviously you want your first couple of turns to be really good, but the 1-drop is kind of what establishes it. Especially against Hook. The Hook quests, we definitely trade into it. Other than that, we can kind of just quest and we'll be fine. We are against Amber Steel here, so a very difficult matchup for sure. This is definitely like a tier 1 deck we're going up against, so hopefully I can show it off quite nicely here. So we are going to ink this Mad Hatter, just because we don't need it. Go for a Flynn, and then I'm going to quest with this Flounder. If the opponent trades into it, then that's fine for me. It kind of clears their board out. They happen to play a really reactive game style, whereas we can just kind of stick to our plan and hope it sticks really. And that's the thing with aggro in this game, is you're kind of just hoping a lot of the time that your opponent doesn't have an answer. It punishes a lot of like unprepared decks, whereas decks like this kind of, a lot more skill expressive for sure. With decks like this, I mean the Amber Steel is definitely a lot more skill expressive, but if you want your wins and you want your surprise explosive factor, then this any Emerald deck really is just a really good starting point for newer TCG players for sure. Opponent's not going to hit us here. I think they want to hit into this Flynn, So what I'm going to do is actually go for Jasper, and I'm only going to quest for Flounder here. The opponent can sing a grab your sword, so I am quite wary of that. Part of me kind of wants to just quest with the Flynn and make them discard cards, just because they only have 3 cards in hand. We know one of them is Be Our Guest, so actually I'm going to pass and just gamble that they don't have grab your sword. If they do, then that's a very good tempo from them. Just quite a high roll, to be honest, but you know, see if we can play around that as well. This is one of those matchups as well where you definitely want to be playing Emerald with Sapphire rather than anything else, just because the Maleficent has so much health. Okay, so there is the grab your sword I was just talking about, which is quite a shame, but it's fine. We can go into our Tinkerbell now, which has evasive, so they've kind of used their AoE, so we can go to our evasives to make it a lot more tricky for them to remove. But yeah, the Maleficent's health is such a huge factor. Being able to like survive a smash and a grab your sword is makes it just so sticky, right? Like, it's just gonna stay on the board a long time. The opponent's only got 1 card left in hand, so hopefully we can do something quite decent here. Let's see what we can do. What is the best game plan for us here? Kind of thinking Flynn Flounder's quite good, rather than just the Tinkerbell. It does only quest for free and doesn't really trade well, so I'm just gonna go ahead and ink. Honestly, this Aurora, and then we can go into this Tinkerbell. We can give Jasper evasive, sure, it doesn't really do anything. And then what we can do is we can just quest, and then we can make it so this beast can't quest next turn. Just slow the opponent down a little bit, and then we can start going into our Maleficent and going wide, hoping that they don't have any card draw. They have inked a Rapunzel, so they might have another Rapunzel in hand. There's a Rockstar Stitch inked as well, so they're inking a lot of their card draw, which is quite good. They are going to Whole New World us, which is quite good. They are going to have a lot more options to deal with our board now, but we do have a lot more like units to just kind of spam out on the board. We're off to quite a slow start as well, so that's one thing to note as well. We do really need to have these like first couple turns go really well for us, especially in this matchup. Just Steel and Amber have such a strong way to deal with aggro. So our new game plan is still to kind of go into this Maleficent turn 5, and then turn 6 we can maybe go for like Tinkerbell and Flynn, just kind of hoping that our quest numbers can go up quite quickly. It's important to note, like last game on turn 4 we were like kind of threatening lethal, whereas here we're only at 3 and we're at disadvantage on the board. But you know, that's just kind of how aggro decks go. In a best of 3 as well, you can kind of be a lot more consistent with your mulligans, whereas best of 1 you're kind of just mulliganing and hoping that you can kind of get some good cards. Opponent's going to shift into Hook here, which is cool. I'm really happy to see this Hook scenes in play. I think it's really strong, but I don't think it stays in the deck in set 2, but for now it's a really fun card as well, especially when you get it on the turn 3. So I'm going to go ahead and ink this Jasper. Don't think we need 2 of them. Go straight into this Maleficent, and then I'm going to quest with the Tinkerbell. Evasives is kind of annoying for our opponent. They don't have many things to deal with evasive. They can use Smash, which they will do, but we can just throw out another one. The opponent is going to start questing for a lot though, so I have to keep that in mind. And the Maleficent only has 3 attacks, so it can get rid of the aerial for sure, but I think we value the quest more than the board state at this point in the game. It's quite tricky to say though. Kind of just hoping that the opponent doesn't go into it. If the opponent goes into a Rockstar Stitch, then we're in trouble because they can just start like spamming stuff on the board. But for now, we're feeling not too bad. I'm trying to think what our best play is. It's probably Tinkerbell Duke, I'd like to imagine. Or we can ink Jasper and then go for Tinkerbell Flynn. Actually seems a little bit better. So yeah, now we're questing for a lot more. Questing for 7, rather than if we played something else we would only be questing for like 6. So it's just the extra 1 point, you know. It doesn't seem like it comes up, but in those close games where you go to like super late game and you're at 19 or 18 quest, it's these little tweaks in your play that will make the difference. So next time we should go up to 7 quests as well, so we can go for the Cat, Jasmine and Duke, and just go really wide. Really against Steel, you don't really want to be the one going wide, but we're in quite a tricky spot here. Opponents already at their Surfer Stitch, that we kind of need to make some like riskier plays, right? Especially now they're clearing out the Maleficent straight away. And I'm going to use the Grab Your Sword. No Tinkerbell just yet though, which is really good for us. If they can establish a Tinkerbell quite early, then we're in a lot of trouble. But we can ink probably Jasmine at this point, to be honest. And then we can go for Hans. And the cat is fine as well. And then we are just going to quest. And it's kind of at this stage in the game where you kind of just have to accept that we've lost. You know, aggro didn't live up to its game plan. It didn't get the first couple of turns established like we wanted. And you can see we just kind of fell apart. The opponent had a really solid turn 3 with the aerial, finding what they needed, and then you know, singing Grab Your Sword that early on in the game is really gonna just annihilate our game plan with any aggro deck, to be honest, not just this one. But I feel like that's why this one does work a lot better than the other aggro decks, is because all the cards have like more health in Sapphire. You can survive those kind of swing turns a lot more of the time, a lot higher percentage of the time at least. So the opponent is going to start drawing their cards with Rockstar Stitch. As you can see, they've already got a very wide board. We are only questing for 7 though, so there's still hope. How much is the opponent questing for here? 11, so they are going to go up to 20, so we're kind of in range of lethal here, so I'm just going to concede. That was a rough game there, but you know, the opponent high rolled. That's how it goes sometimes, but I hope I displayed the deck quite well. Other than that, I'll see you in the next video. Thank you for watching.